here. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us at Secular AZ today. We are a nonprofit organization focused on protecting the Constitution and the separation of church and state for over a decade. We've had some really great programming, and next week we're going to be speaking with Dr. Greta de Jong, who will speak about the forced displacement of asylum-seeking migrants by GOP governors. Thanks, Lindsay, for putting that up. You can see we've got some other updates coming on the 4th, which is right before Election Day. We're going to be talking about ballot measures and how to vote. I know most of our members have probably already voted. And, you know, pro tip, if you don't want people to knock on your door anymore or call you, probably you want to go ahead and put your ballot in the mailbox. So without any further ado, today joining us is Vic. And you know what, Vic, I know you go by Vic, and is your last name pronounced Aronow? Is that right?
Aronow is good. I'll take that one.
Aronow. Okay. So Victor Aronow is a native son of Brooklyn, which I never would have guessed with your accent, and resident of Phoenix for over 35 years, graduated from Boston College Law School and came out west to seek his fortune. He practiced criminal, civil rights, and labor law for 25 years, and then entered the teaching field where he taught adult education in a local school district for over 10 years. He is a member of the board of many nonprofit organizations, including the Southwest Heritage Foundation and the Arizona Alliance for Peace and Justice. So now I have to ask you, Vic, because my background is in education as well. What grade level did you teach?
Actually, I did it parallel to maintaining my law practice. I got a master's to teach English as a second language and mostly to adults. But when I went overseas to work in some of these progressive and revolutionary organizations, I was also teaching, you know, high school students and even younger than that in some of these countries that I was in.
Very cool. Well, is there anything that I missed in your bio that you want to share with the people who are in the webinar or watching on Facebook?
Well, I'm still in practice. I've been practicing for 52 years now in Phoenix. And my initial assignment here was only 2 years, and I'm still here. I don't know what happened. One day I woke up and it was 52 years had gone by. So, no, that's good. That's good. If people have questions, people can ask me questions, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll have people. Yeah, folks, if you want to ask any questions of Vic about the judges, please feel free to put them in the Q&A, or if you're watching on Facebook, I'll monitor on my other screen what's going on over there. But, you know, let's get right to it. And I don't know if you want to just go down your list and Lindsay can share, but, you know, or share the methodology of how you've gone through this process. That would be great, because I know there's a lot of other organizations that do this. And so your answers might, you know, your choices might be a little bit different from theirs. So go ahead. I'm going to turn it over to you, Vic.
Sure. Let me just give you a 2-minute background on Vic's Picks. This is the now 12th election cycle that we've been sending out Vic's Picks. We started very small, just, I think it might have been not even printed. It was mimeographed. And it was a group of us that got together at the Phoenix Pork Pie Palace. But unfortunately, the kitchen caught on fire. We don't meet there anymore. But it was a great get together for years and years and years. And as a lawyer, I feel that to maintain respectful law and respect for the judicial system and the rule of law, you have to have judges that respect the law and respect people as well, whether they're defendants or plaintiffs or prosecutors or defense attorneys, whatever it is. And that I see on the horizon, in fact, it's not even on the horizon anymore, a gathering storm of right-wing, let's see, President Biden called them semi-fascists, but I would call them full-fledged fascists. And one of the things that fascist governments do, and what I think typically was the Nazi government, is they got rid of whole classes of judges and replaced them with party members. And that led to the collapse of the judicial system and a complete denial of any kinds of rights that may have existed in Germany. And unfortunately, I see the same thing happening here. And so I think this is a particularly critical time in our history when we really have to be aware of who the judges are and what they're like and what they're doing. And because our little group broke up temporarily, they're coming together again now that COVID's over. I went to the, I will just give you the name. It is somebody's even got it in the chat here and wants to know. So I will give you Civic Engagement Beyond Voting is an Arizona organization that took up the task of looking at all the judges. And the methodology was to look at there's a Judicial Review Commission, which I can talk about in a minute. And there were also newspaper reports, and they went through lots and lots of appeals, opinions, appeals from superior courts, and came up with a list of judges that they recommended not be reelected to the office. And I went through their list, and I took a somewhat stronger position than they did with a lot of the judges, that they said, well, you have your choice on this, or a yes with qualifications. And I said, no, vote no, because these people are incipiently beginning to carve out those little pieces of the judicial structure and undercut it. And we have a lot of judges. There's a lot of good people out there who could be judges, and we don't need to put up with people that are halfway judges. So I sent Vic's picks over to Secular AZ, and I think they posted it. Was it posted somewhere?
Yes, it's on our website, and I did put that link in the chat.
Okay, great. And if people are interested, I can go through this report. I also, Vic's Picks also does a large analysis on the propositions. It's more than a list. It's a real analysis of what the propositions are and what they mean for progressive voters in Arizona. But what I did is, for example, the Arizona Supreme Court, there's a judge here named James P. Bean. And the Civic Engagement said, well, we retain with reservations. But I said, no, I think you should vote against him, because his decision in the Madonna case, which was sort of one of the critical decisions of the last term, fundamentally undercuts the ability of citizens organizations to put initiatives on the ballot without hiring a squad of professionals. What that decision said was that citizens initiatives, and you'll see if you go through the propositions, you'll see that citizens initiatives are a very important tool to maintain democratic participation in the Arizona governing structure. And what Bean's decision was that there has to be strict compliance with all of the requirements that the legislature has to meet to put something on the ballot. And this creates impossible burdens for community organizations and for statewide organizations that want to try to get an initiative on. For example, one of the parts of the ruling was that if the signature goes above or below the line in the little box that you sign, the signature is invalid. And there were, I mean, especially for elderly people who have a little difficulty with motor control, you can't help but go above the line or a little bit or below the line a little bit. And this decision had serious repercussions with regard to, if you just hold on for 1 second here, I will look at my list. Yeah, what was going to be Proposition 210, the Arizona Fair Elections Act, which was going to be a complete rewrite of the voting system in Arizona. They turned in 475,000 signatures on their petitions, and they only needed 238,000. But the courts winnowed it down, and one of them was this little above the line and below the line ruling in the case that Madonna case, and they threw it out because it had insufficient signatures. But it was double the number of signatures that they actually needed to get on the ballot. But little by little, based on this Madonna case, the courts cut away, and this opportunity to override the legislature and do something about our voting system in Arizona was completely undercut, and eventually was ruled to not be eligible to be placed on the ballot. So these small cases can have enormous repercussions for the political health of our community and of our state. The other one that in the Supreme Court is William Montgomery. Now, William Montgomery used to be the Attorney General, the county attorney here in Maricopa County. He was a terrible county attorney. He completely politicized the office, even more than Brnovich did. And he has a bad personality, according to many people. And at the time, his office, as the Republic pointed out at one point, was his office was plagued by scandals and lawsuits. He is not qualified to be a Supreme Court judge. That's the bottom line. He's not qualified at all, and he shouldn't be retained.
I
ahead,
just
shoot.
think about too, just Maricopa County in general. I mean, the corruption there has been going on for decades. I remember Andy Thomas, and refresh my memory, was Bill Montgomery before or after Andy Thomas?
I think he was after.
Yeah.
I think it was after.
But yeah, that whole office has just been plagued with scandal and controversy and mismanagement for decades now.
That's why I support Gonigal. They're going to clean, hopefully she can clean that up, although, the county attorney's office is a very large bureaucracy, and there are good attorneys there. There are good, fair prosecutors there. And I've litigated many cases against their prosecutors, and they're not really happy with the way their offices run either. And the county attorney has a very critical role that affects the lives of tens of thousands of people in Maricopa County every year. And it's really an office that needs closer examination than most people give it. They say, oh yeah, I'm a Republican, I'll vote for this one, or I'm a Democrat, I vote for that one. But it's a little more critical. Let me just shut this window, okay? There are 3 fraternity houses in my neighborhood. And so there's a lot of traffic up and down the street. And it's really one of those races, it's down the ballot a little bit, and people sometimes skip it and sometimes just vote what the party line is, but it's really something that needs to be examined closely as far as influential offices in the county. Yeah, so William Montgomery is another one that I said, no, don't vote for this. And the organization agreed with me. Interestingly enough, the Judicial Review Commission gave him 19 positives and 2 negatives, does not meet their standards. And that's sort of a significant thing too. One would hope that the judges would meet all of their criteria for effective, efficient, and nonpartisan, not prejudiced judges, but he doesn't. So then we have the Court of Appeals. There's 2 divisions in the Court of Appeals. One of them is in Phoenix and covers Phoenix and North, and the other one is in Tucson and covers basically south of Phoenix all the way down to the Mexico border. Nobody seems to have a problem with the judges in the Court of Appeals in the southern part, but in Division 1, Cynthia Bailey, she got a no vote, and I supported that vote because she's a member of the Federalist Society, a strong member of the Federalist Society, which is a right-wing conservative lawyer organization that promotes the appointment of judges who reflect the originalist theory, which is creating so much trouble today, that have very conservative economic views, that have very conservative views on what the Constitution and particularly the civil rights provisions of the Constitution mean. And the Federalist Society actively participates in judicial proceedings. The last, I think maybe four, might be three or four nominees to the Supreme Court have male nominees, I might point out, have all been strongly supported by the Federalist Society. She not only is a member of the Federalist Society, but she also has attended their conventions. She's been a speaker, and she's a strong believer in originalism as a judicial philosophy. And if, for those of you who don't know what that means, maybe if I have a minute, I can explain that. Originalism was something that was invented in the Supreme Court by Justice Scalia. And yeah, it was basically Scalia's doing, and Alioto was another one. And what it says is that the Constitution of the United States is carved in stone. It doesn't change with the times. It doesn't alter itself based on changing circumstances. And if the Constitution doesn't preclude certain activities, if the Constitution doesn't require certain activities, that's it. Whatever the face of the Constitution says, as determined by the people who wrote the Constitution or the amendments. So, as you know, for example, the case that overturned Roe v. Wade, the fundamental ruling of the court, if you dig down into that opinion, is that the Constitution never addressed the question of choice, particularly in abortions. And since the Constitution never addressed it, there's no constitutional provision that covers it, and therefore it must be a reserved power to the states. And so now it's all thrown open for every state to decide its own choice laws, its own abortion laws. Another area is in the Second Amendment, where they said, well, the Constitution provided that, and they read one sentence that said that you have the right to bear arms. Well, the original intention, they said, of the framers was to give every person in the country, every citizen, the right to carry a weapon. That's it. I mean, that's the originalist theory. And so there's no limitations, there's no restrictions. They knocked down a California and a New York law on those grounds. So the Federalist Society strongly supports these originalist views. And in my opinion, and of many other lawyers and of CEBV, that these originalist views and the Federalist Society support are a danger to the democracy. So we urged a no vote on Cynthia Bailey. Then you get down to that long list of 50 or so judges from Maricopa County. We're the biggest county, so we have the longest list.
Hey,
And
Vic, I have a quick
Shoot.
question. Like, when you talk about that originalist viewpoint, I mean, when the Constitution was written, the weapon, the guns, they were single shot. You had to pack gunpowder in. Can that be used as an argument to say, the founding fathers never intended us to have AR-15s. This is what the weapons look like then. And if you're going to take an originalist point of view, well, then I don't understand how that works.
Well, the Supreme Court's opinion was that there really isn't any limitation in the Constitution. And with regard to the California and New York cases, that since the Constitution says that Congress shall make no law, then that essentially divested the states of the power to make no law. But actually, you see what the Constitution says, and I just happen to have my Constitution right here. What it actually says is a well-regulated militia being necessary for the defense of the nation, the right to carry arms shall not be infringed on. Well, what is a well-regulated militia? The Constitution, in another section that the Supreme Court has completely ignored in all of these gun cases, says that the well-regulated militia operates under the control of Congress, that Congress appropriates money for it, the Congress sets up the order of arms, that Congress approves the appointment of militia officers. And so the Constitution addresses the whole question of what a well-regulated militia is. It's all in the Constitution, but the Supreme Court has ignored all of that language. They have not really dealt with that in any case in the last, maybe 15 years that has to do with gun control. And that's because they have this fundamentalist view that, I don't know what, it's not even originalism. If it were originalism, they would talk about the rest of it. It's an ideological bent, that's all. And that's why we have to be very careful about the judges that are sitting on the bench, especially in the higher appellate judge courts and the judges of the Supreme Court. What's an interesting effect of the development of a reactionary Supreme Court is that more and more cases are going to resolution in the state Supreme Courts. And the state of Arizona happens to have a very good constitution. It was written in 1912, the height of the progressive era. It has a lot of very excellent provisions in it. Some of you may be familiar with the whole question now of the state constitutional provision about the right of privacy and the right to choose. And the Planned Parenthood has a lawsuit going in which they are asking the state Supreme Court to determine whether or not Ross, which is the case that overturned Roe v. Wade, whether or not Ross controls where the state constitution puts in a right of privacy, which they interpret to mean a right of privacy between a doctor and a patient. And so it's an excellent constitution and people should read it. And I believe that there are certain areas where the federal government has to take control because it reaches more than just one state. It addresses a national problem. But I also think that state constitutions are an important tool in the armamentarium of progressive forces, and that it's very underutilized. State constitution is very underutilized. So that was a good question. And I don't think we're going to see much of a change in the U.S. Supreme Court in the next 4 years. And so that's one of the reasons why we have to, sorry, Diane Post corrected me. It's not Dobbs. It's not Ross, it's Dobbs. She's right. I'm wrong. What can I say? Diane, you're right. I'm wrong. She's always right, and I'm never wrong, or I'm always wrong. But what can I say? So we've got all of these judges in the Superior Court, and probably let's just take one as an example, which is Bradley Ostrowski. He was actually reprimanded by the Commission on Judicial Conduct in 2019 for delaying judgment in a marriage dissolution case to the extent that he failed to comply with the Supreme Court rules on when you have to issue judgments. In another case, he sent the children of Major League Baseball player David Segui to an unlicensed reunification camp where they stayed with their abusive mother, severed communications with the father. he's simply not a good judge. He's not the kind of person who should be sitting on the bench. Oh, this is great. This is great. I can see the screen here. Rusty Crandall. He's another member of the Federalist Society, and he works in Bronovich's federalism unit. I might want to talk about that for a second. What happened was that Aronow set up a special unit, and I think it now has 10 or 12 attorneys in it, whose only job is to find conflicts between federal and state law, and then bring cases in the federal courts challenging the federal law based on state constitutional principles. What this means is that a big piece of the budget was shifted over to this federalism unit and taken away from things like the Consumer Protection Division, the Civil Rights Division, a lot of these divisions that really protected people's rights so that Aronow could forward his political agenda. And so Judge Crandall was a member of this unit. He's a member of the Federalist Society, and he is another judge, I think, whose ideology overrides his ability to be a fair and honest and indifferent, not indifferent really, but unbiased member of the bench. So you can read about him there. Let's see, Monica Epstein. This is another one where I went a little bit further, and I said she had one does not meet from the Judicial Review Commission, but I think that in cases like this, it's more important to have judges on the bench that are unbiased and are fair, and that if you have a feeling or your understanding of the situation is that this is a judge who may have some negative aspects, you should vote against him. And perhaps if enough people vote them out, then they'll get judges in there who are better. I have to say, in all fairness, that when we still had judges who were running on party platforms, they were real brawls. And in the case, for example, of Judge Tang, who was a Democratic judge, he ran on a Democratic ticket, excellent judge, was voted out of office because of a big Republican upsurge against him, and ironically got appointed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, where he served very well for many years. The Judicial Review Commission and the system we have now was in response to the increasing partisanship of the judicial election procedures and the expense. And now I think this is the Judicial Review Commission is a beginning, but that citizens need to really keep an eye on the judges, which is why I said, no, let's vote no. We have to maintain respect for our legal system and guarantee a fair and impartial tribunal. Michael Herod, the note here says, and that his wife is Kathy Herod, whom a lot of you may be familiar with in her anti-choice, anti-feminist positions she's taken over the years. But as the note points out, it doesn't seem to have influenced his decisions at all. And so I would maintain that you could vote yes on him, even though the organization says yes with the note. I would say, go ahead. He meets all the other qualifications. The fact that his wife founded and is a representative and spokesperson for these kinds of organizations doesn't seem to have affected his impartiality. So everything seems to be above board. So vote yes for him. What else have we got here? We have, let's see, Herod. Oh yeah, Stephen Hopkins. Yeah, he totally unqualified, even by the standards of the Judicial Review Commission. And how is the Judicial Review Commission set up? This is, surveys are sent out, mainly to lawyers. What's your view of this judge? And most lawyers either don't answer or say, oh, fine, the judge is fine. Just let him go, let her go, it's done. This one does not meet 15 standards and is completely, according to the Judicial Performance Review, unqualified to be a judge in any way, shape, or form. And if you want to go back and read the Judicial Performance Review notations, you can do that in that big fat voter's guide that probably everybody got in the mail, or you can go online. And I would say, in this case, the Judicial Commission is absolutely right. And this is a judge who should not be on the bench at all. Melissa Julian is the same situation as an earlier judge. There are deficiencies. She met all the criteria, but she does not relate well to people in the courtroom. She doesn't relate well to attorneys. She doesn't relate well to witnesses, and she exhibits certain bias tendencies. And I would say that she should get a no vote as well. Then we've got Susanna Pineda. She meets 20 of the standards, but there were consistent comments, as it says here, that she's poorly prepared, doesn't read the pleadings, doesn't pay sufficient attention to parental abuse and substance abuse in custody hearings. And in general, she suffers from we call, and from what I could read and find out about her, she suffers from black robitis. They had yes with reservations. It's not overt enough so that you could vote no, but I would recommend a no vote on her. I would recommend a no vote. I didn't put that in there. I should have put that in there, but a no vote on her would be, I think, appropriate. And then finally, we have Howard Sukenik. He also didn't meet a number of the standards and was especially, I think the notes were from the review commission that he was arrogant and he suffered from black robitis. You know, once you get that black robe on, you feel like you rule the whole world. And so that was a no vote there. Then we go down to, is there anyone here from Pima County? Do you know?
I'm looking right now. I'm not sure about the folks in the webinar. I don't see, we do have a member, Mary, who is, who oftentimes shows up to these things, but I don't see her. So if anybody here is from Pima County, here you go. But they could be watching on Facebook too, so.
Sure. I would say that Bostwick, rather conservative, but there's very little information about what she's done. But based on her background, she has a yes with a note. My recommendation would be to vote no on Bostwick.
Okay.
What did I put in the front here? Hold on just a second. Yeah, I said, go look at the notes. For a lot of these people, I felt that you really have to decide for yourself where you stand on this question of judicial impartiality. And I didn't make direct recommendations on any of these, although I personally, if I lived in Pima County, I would vote against retention for Bostwick. And then finally, I think we have Pinell County. Oh, yeah, Pinell and Coconino County. What have we got for Pinell? Yeah, I want to go down. Stephen Fuller. Same situation. I would vote no personally for Stephen Fuller. Although there are some credible accusations that were made against him, but he was never charged, and I believe firmly in the principle that you're innocent until proven guilty.
Mhm.
He met 28 of the standards. And seems to have improved a little bit, because in the prior time he ran, he had 4 does not meet. So he's people can judge on their personal feelings about accusations that were made but never charged, and were never proven. So I didn't take a position on that one. That's a pretty personal choice for people to make. And then finally, with this Coconino Superior Court, this is another judge who didn't meet all of the performance requirements, and I would say vote no for this judge as well. So that's pretty much what there is on the judges. Let me just see what kinds of questions we have here. Let's see, where Diana, let me go back to the top here. What do we have? Here we go. Let's see, there we go. Okay, what is CEBV? CEBV stands for the
It's a civic engagement beyond
civic
voting.
engagement beyond voting. This is an organization. Go ahead.
And I think that their question was, how is CEBV, their gavel watch, as a resource? And I think this question was already answered, because as you said, that you've worked with the folks who put that, those, recommendations together, but you take it a bit further and, don't always go right along with their recommendations.
Right.
And that's why you've given us these explanations.
Right.
Let's see if there are any, there's a comment here. Sandra says that she thinks most needed to be voted out, especially if appointed by Ducey. And I mean, for me, I know that I went ahead and made some of those decisions based on who appointed those judges. And then Diane has a comment here that there's no point in the with reservations, because there is no one that's going to look at that or care. So it sounds to me like Diane is also saying just vote no if there are reservations.
That's probably correct. That's probably correct. I wanted to leave it a little more open than that for some of these judges who were not, I felt, sufficiently biased or had bad reviews and stuff like that, and people can make up their own minds. I would note that, Earl Warren, Supreme Court Justice Earl Warren, was appointed to the Supreme Court by President Eisenhower. And in his memoirs, Eisenhower said that was the worst decision he ever made in his whole life. So you can say, yes, the Ducey judges should be voted out, but there's 1 or 2 of them that are pretty reasonable and are not on the ballot this time. And some of them, and there have been a number of rulings from the state Supreme Court that have gone against the governor. So you really have to look at these judges individually. I don't think you can say, all right, all of these people are Ducey judges and therefore they're bad. I mean, the people could have said, oh, that Earl Warren, he's an Eisenhower judge. Get him out of here. But look what he did for the judicial system and for progressive causes in the United States.
So I have a
Go ahead.
question, and any of our legal minds that are in the Zoom meeting right now or watching on Facebook, feel free to weigh in on this. But the judiciary the intention was for it to be politically agnostic, right? Like unbiased. And now it's really clear that not just in the Supreme Court, but all throughout the courts in the United States, that these have become increasingly partisan. And so I have a couple of, first of all, what can we do? If you could wave a magic wand, what could we do to fix this, the strategy of theirs to get as many Federalist, lawyers and judges into these positions what can we do to combat that? If you could do anything, what would be the solution?
Well, I think that one of the problems is the way that the Congress selects these judges and votes on them. And I think that the filibuster is an issue here, that the Federalist Society working and lobbying senators is a problem here. But I think that more fundamentally, the initial screening process needs to be clarified, corrected, and strengthened. And the question has come up many times, maybe we shouldn't have lifetime appointments. There's nothing in the Constitution that says anything about the judges except that their salaries can't be changed during their term. The whole judicial system, the federal judicial system, is established by the Judiciary Act, I think of it's either 1789 or 1791. And there's no reason why the Judiciary Act could not be amended, for example, to put term limits on judges. You serve for 20 years and you retire. That would be a fundamental change in the way the judiciary operated. And that would go all the way down the line, down to the district courts and the district court commissioners. I think that imposing term limits is a solution that should be looked at. It wouldn't be hard to do because it's only a statute that controls the terms and the number of the judges. I don't think that increasing the number of judges is necessarily a good way to go. Governor Ducey railroaded through an amendment to the state constitution that increased the number of judges, and I don't think that it's been generally favorable towards the people of Arizona. I don't think numbers really make a difference. I think it's the fact that you're appointed for life and there's no real screening in a real deep fundamental sense in the discussion. Look at the last two men. No, I'm sorry, one man, one woman. What was the big thing? When was it Kavanaugh was a teenager or a college student. He did this and he did that. Who cares? Who cares? The real issues are, what was his position on originalism? What was his judicial philosophy? What did he study in law school that really influenced his thinking? Who is really promoting him? Those issues were all swept under the table. And I put the blame on the Democrats for that. I mean, they grabbed onto this whole thing about some incident when he was a college student, and everything else got swept away for the excitement, you might say, or the spectacle of this judge whose fundamental philosophies were never brought into question before a vote was taken. And I think that's a real problem with the selection process in the United States. It's turned into theater, it's turned into circus. And it didn't used to be that way.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna respectfully disagree. I mean, I partially agree with you because I think that it could be both and, right? But instead, I get your point. It took over the conversation instead of, how are you going to, handle this lifetime appointment in the Supreme Court? But I do think that, I definitely think somebody with a lifetime appointment should be scrutinized, their actions and their behaviors, because it speaks to their character. And I mean, the thing that really irks me too about the appointments that last guy, number 45, was able to just railroad in, first of all, is the denial of President Obama to be able to appoint somebody. That was ridiculous. The railroading and just the real, I mean, what an affront to, the legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg to put somebody like Amy Coney Barrett in there And then
Mhm.
finally, the fact that they all said that they were not going to overturn things that had been, settled in the Supreme Court. And there's no repercussions for that. And we, the people now, these are folks we don't even vote for, and now little by little, our rights are being chipped away and we have no say so.
Well, that raises another very interesting question. The Constitution of the United States is based on jealousy, fear, and suspicion. The three branches of government are always jockeying for more power that they take away from the other two branches. This is my view of it. And I think it was the view of the founding fathers. There should be a dynamic disequilibrium among the three branches. And right now, because Congress is so unable to deal with major questions of policy, of politics, of what the country needs and where the country's going, the Supreme Court has moved into that vacuum and has now taken over the role that Congress should have assumed. The Supreme Court has become a legislative branch, essentially, by saying this is illegal, this is unconstitutional, this is okay. And the balance of power has shifted. And it's gone through all through our history. At some points, the executive is very strong, and then the legislative is strong, the Supreme Court. It's not unusual. It's just that now the Supreme Court has swung way, way, way over out of the frame, so to speak, of the main track of American Republican democracy, representative democracy. And I think that you're absolutely right, that there's something wrong with the selection process, and there's no power of recall. Well, they can be impeached. I take that back. A Supreme Court justice can be impeached. Supreme Court justices like Abe Fortas were forced to resign because of a brewing gambling scandal. But aside from those kinds of tools, it's very difficult to get a Supreme Court justice off. Now, one of the results of that, in my view, is that as the Supreme Court moves further and further away from what the mainstream is in American thinking, and I think the controversy about right to choose is an example of that, gun control is an example of that, political development starts at the base again. People have relied on the Supreme Court for many, many years to resolve what are essentially social and political issues. And now that the Supreme Court is way over here, we have to find political routes through elections to get more representative government on this side so that the Supreme Court no longer becomes the major arbiter of social development and political development in our country. And so in some respects, if you look at the history of the labor movement, for example, they've relied for many, many years on the Supreme Court, and their organizing abilities were weakened. Now they realize there's no relief over here, especially since the whole line of cases about picketing and stuff like that, the meat packers case and some of the others. So now political groups are coming up here. Take a look at Citizens United, or the various cases on discriminatory religious practices. And so organizations such as yours are becoming more politicized and more political, because you're not going to get any relief over here. The only place where you can get relief is through the ballot box and through public protests, and for running candidates that reflect your views and supporting candidates that reflect your views and taking away that power. That's why forums like this are really important. I mean, this is the country is moving in a direction while organizations like this organization are going to become increasingly politicized, whether you like it or not, it's going to happen, and increasingly influential and increasingly vocal. And that is going to be the tendency until the next presidential election. So
Right.
congratulations on being on the forefront.
Well, and yeah, I'm actually working on communication, because we know that a lot of our members too are very generous to political campaigns, ballot initiatives, et cetera. And no matter which way this election in 2022 goes, you know, we are run on, you know, the donations of the public. And so, you know, I'm hoping that a lot of those folks who have been so dedicated in supporting whoever they're supporting will then funnel their money over to us, because we definitely need all the help that we can get. Now, I don't know if you, you know, if you are like a historian of the Supreme Court, but my question is this the most partisan Supreme Court that we've ever seen, the most conservative Supreme Court that we've ever seen in the history of the US?
I would say that's a difficult question to answer, because it depends on how you look at the picture. From the point of view of religious freedom and humanist freedom and secular freedom, and the First Amendment, this is certainly the most, I think, the most reactionary, and I don't hesitate to use that word at all, reactionary Supreme Court we've ever had in the history of the country. From the point of the rights of minorities, this Supreme Court is not as reactionary as the Supreme Court that was sitting just before the Civil War and after the Civil War, with Plessy versus Ferguson, the so-called separate but not equal doctrine, those kinds. That Supreme Court was very reactionary, very racist. And you go and you read their opinions, and it's absolutely appalling the kinds of language that they used. And after the Depression started, Roosevelt had all these programs that he wanted to introduce, the National Reconstruction Act, the Farm Home Loan Act, all of these. And one by one, an economically reactionary Supreme Court struck them down, all on the basis that this interfered with free enterprise, which had brought us the Depression, although nobody wanted to admit that, capitalism, which brought us the Depression, and they wanted to preserve the economic situation that had existed, the economic system that existed in the 1920s, which is why Roosevelt floated his idea of court packing, because he couldn't get enough votes to let these bills through. As soon as that came out, there was a complete right turn in the Supreme Court, as everybody who's, you know, familiar with what they did in that era knows. And all of a sudden, oh yeah, that's okay. Yeah, we'll pass that one. That one doesn't violate the Constitution. So the threat of enlarging the Supreme Court in that particular case had quite a curative effect on the judges. So this is in different times, they've been reactionary in different ways, but the tendency is to shift here and there depending on Mr. Dooley, who's a fictitious character, Peter Finley Dunn, said, the court follows the elections. And I think that's as true now as when he wrote that in the late 1940s. In other words, as the country is moving to the right, the court's going to move to the right. As the country moves to the left, the court tends to move to the left, and doesn't maintain any straight path down the middle. So not the most reactionary in some respects.
And it sounds to me like, because I think you said something earlier, you wouldn't recommend expanding the number of people on any, you know, Supreme Court, state Supreme Court, federal Supreme Court. Am I correct?
I don't think that's a solution. The solution is to is to get better judges who are really free of partisanship, and to explore in these hearings what their real philosophies are. They can say, oh, I don't think we should overturn precedent, but that's just a bunch of BS. Everybody knows that. And they admitted as much by their affiliations and by their prior opinions. And for example, who was it? Senator Collins from Maine, who went around after, was it the Roe case or one of the cases before that? He lied to me. He lied to me. Well, Senator, you should have done your homework. So, no, I don't think expanding the courts. Maybe they should only be 3 people on a court. I don't know, but I don't think expansion is a solution to this. Term limits might be, better selection process, deeper investigation.
Mhm. So, again, these Friday, Diane said, when we were talking about Kavanaugh and the assault charges with Christine Blasey Ford, it does show his judicial philosophy. Anyone he considers under him has no equal rights. So, yeah, but I do, again, I think that's a both and. We should have been able to highlight, everything about this guy and not just focus on the one thing. But anyway, what's done is done. I'll tell you, these Friday discussions lately have been, we talk about things that are very political, we talk about history, we talk about the rise of Christian nationalism. And sometimes, it's kind of sometimes a rough start to the weekend because, then I just start thinking about kind of watching this great experiment coming to an end. And there's so many people who are ushering in a new, fascism, so I guess my question, what's going to save us from the fact that, the courts have now been packed by so many of these Federalist judges? What can you say on a Friday afternoon to give the people hope?
Well, I can only refer to what the great Chinese philosopher Mao Zedong said, which is that one spark can start a prairie fire, and the march of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And organizations like yours are many, many steps on that march. And it's difficult, I know, especially in the United States, which I forget the name of the Supreme Court case. It came down around 1910. It said the United States is a Christian nation. That was part of their ruling in, I didn't even know how it got in there. But the systematic thinking that secularism promotes, the investigation that secularism promotes, the philosophy of humanism is a philosophy which needs to be pushed forward in this country. I myself, whenever I go out and talk to people, I try to always get beyond their, well, God's plan is this and that. And I say, what kind of a plan is this, what was it, the movie? God comes, and he says, I made a mistake. It was the avocado. The pit is too big, but that pit is where we start working, and we just start spreading out and spreading out and spreading out. I get up every morning and I am optimistic every day. Every day. First of all, I'm not in the obituary, but most importantly, it's another day to go out and join in the great struggle to keep this country on what I perceive democracy and our representative government to be all about. And I try to do that every single day. I would say that constitutionalism is my religion. That's my religion. And I think everybody should take this book and really study it. It's a good document. Sure, it has its cranky parts and creaky parts, but it's worth looking and reading into. And every day you go out and you just do your work as a citizen and try to talk to one or two people during the day, side conversations, and you just continue to develop the political attitude that will eventually, as the old man said, the great sword of the dialectic cuts in both directions. So while we're moving over to the right like this, contradictions are developing on this side, which will eventually overcome them. And we just have to go out every day and promote the development of those fissures and cracks and questions and all the things that people worry about and think about and need to learn about. What can I say?
Well, and yeah, I'm doing my own work at getting people elected, and
Yeah,
I'm inspired.
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm inspired right now because, we have seen just all this since ballots dropped, just a constant stream of people, folks coming from California and spending weeks or a month here to help get out the vote. And so, it takes those individual conversations when we can coax people off of their couch and to the doorway so we can engage in a conversation, make phone calls, whatever it is. Because, I feel like we're kind of watching it evaporate, and all I can do is hope that people have finally woken up and are seeing what happens when they're not engaged with what's happening from the school board level all the way up to the presidency and
Absolutely,
everything
Jean,
in between.
you hit the nail right on the head. You're doing tremendous work. And although you can't perhaps see the results on a day-to-day basis, you use the word evaporate. That's absolutely the case. But evaporation leads to what? Condensation.
Right. Yeah.
And so as you see your hopes and dreams and political desires and social goals evaporating in this direction, over here, they're recondensing into some rain that's going to make new plants grow up in the political sphere. So you're absolutely right. You're doing the perfect thing that people should be doing.
Yeah.
And
Well, and Diane
congratulations.
says, this is going to give us all a great weekend as you put on your, tennis shoes to go knock on doors, or so you charge your phone to make those phone calls. Diane says, last night, I convinced 2 women to vote who weren't going to, but now are because of abortion. So one at a time, we'll get these folks registered and we will create the society that we want. And Vic, I just can't thank you enough. And thanks to Diane for making this connection. I now have a new resource to use as I fill out my ballot. And again, the link is up on Facebook. It's on our website. So anybody who wants to access Vic's picks, please do so. And Vic, thanks again so much for taking time out to talk to folks today.
And let me just add one closing note. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Sure.
It isn't often that I get an opportunity to appear on internet about anything. And let me just close with this. Don't forget, this is a skirmish. The big battle is going to be in 2 years. And that's the battle we have to build for now. That's where we're going to go. So thanks again, Diane. Thanks for setting it all up, and for everybody who stuck around. I appreciate it. And you've got the VIX picks. You can download it and take a look at it. And I think we're done.
All right. Well,
I'm
thanks.
going to go out and do some flyering this afternoon.
All right. Sounds
Okay.
good. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.